We are talking the abandoned asylum horror movie Investigation 13. This one is directed by Krisstian de Lara and stars Meg Foster, who you probably will recognise, I think, most from the live-action Masters of the Universe movie that starred Dolph Lundgren. She played Evil Lynn, and she was recently in Jeepers Creepers 3, if you haven't seen that. Anyway, so Investigation 13 is a kind of hybrid found footage, kind of regular filmed kind of movie with animated sequences. Yes, it has 3 different film styles in one. And basically the story here is we have a group of students and they are trying to prove the existence of the paranormal. And they have been granted access to go into this long abandoned asylum that has had a history with a particular kind of inmate in particular, this guy who is dubbed the Mole Man, and they are allowed there to spend one night to try and capture the evidence that they need. When they go there, Meg Foster's character is the person who actually owns the property, and yes, you know, she just doesn't believe in ghosts, all that kind of stuff. And she's kind of, you know, a little bit kind of seems a little bit kooky, a little bit wacky. So there are a group of intrepid explorers obviously spend the night, and as you probably expect, they are not quite alone. And what actually happens? Well, you'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss Investigation 13. So what works, first of all, with this movie? For me, I love the inclusion of Meg Foster. She just gives this really kind of like this weathered kind of performance of someone who has really been worn down by life. I mean, she's not in the movie loads, to be fair, but I thought she was very well cast here as someone who is seemingly not really kind of that conspicuous, but who's just been kind of like just had enough of the kind of the bad publicity that this particular building is going to give her, and I thought she was quite good in the role. And I've got to say, I think the initial setup here is pretty good. You know, we have these kind of students that actually they're not breaking into somewhere; they actually have applied and kind of got the proper permit to go and stay somewhere. So I thought was quite a kind of nice change of pace. And the building, the actual location that they've used here, they've got this huge. It's very imposing. It's got these huge kind of like sliding doors. It's more like a prison. So I thought the actual, you know, the set design here and the kind of the actual on location where it's shot looks really cool, and it was ambitious, obviously, to have different kind of styles of filming within this film. We'll come on to what I think about that in just a minute, but I think it was at the very least ambitious, and there are a couple of kind of sort of fairly good jump scares and kind of creepy moments within the movie. I've got to say, I think our lead actress was fairly good. So let's move on to what doesn't work. So we're going to start off with the biggest thing for me, and that is the kind of switching up of the genres of filming here. So we have 3 distinct styles of storytelling within this movie. Our regular camera kind of angle, like your traditional sort of style horror movies. Our found footage, which we sometimes see the kind of like POV shots through that, and then the animated. So I think there's a little bit too much going on, and it switches styles. I think there's too much, to be honest. I think you can get away with maybe having some things done in kind of first person. There's a number of films that I've seen that have done that. So it's like a partial found footage movie. But I don't think it works as well, because you don't get that kind of like that investment as much if it's all found footage. Because obviously it kind of shatters the illusion, so to speak. But I think it can work. But the animated sequences for me were such a kind of unnecessary addition. What I think has happened with this one, and this is my speculation, is that the running time wasn't long enough to be counted as a feature film. I think to be classed as a feature film and to be sold as such, it has to be at least 70 minutes or something. If I might be quite a little bit wrong on the numbers, but there is actually a minimum time limit to be classed as a feature film to get a DVD release and things like that. So I suspect animated sequences were added to pad out the running time, and this essentially gives a little bit of backstory to you know, maybe a character that's featured within this sort of story, but they're so jarring that I mean, the animation is it's barely animation, to say that. It's just kind of more or less static cartoon images with like a little bit of a waving hand or something like that. And it's acted by different people. It's not like someone's saying like, oh, this is what happened to this particular character. It's just added in really cheaply. I honestly think it's just there to kind of pad out the running time. And then they actually do have a real life, you know, a kind of a filmed flashback as well. So they actually have two different kind of styles of flashback. There's actually a flashback later on in the movie that actually shows real footage. So it so smacks of just being added in kind of like post-production to pad out the running time. And it's really bad. It's a really bad decision, if you ask me. So there's that. The actual story itself is very generic when it comes down to it. I don't think it does anything new, or outside of the trying these kind of three different kind of styles of footage, which I don't think works. But other than that, it's just a kind of very much paint by numbers, walking around, you know, an abandoned place. And speaking of this apparently is an abandoned facility, but it is in really good condition. Now, obviously the budget, I guess, doesn't stretch to kind of like dirtying it up or whatever, having to clean up afterwards. But you've seen some low-budget movies that have these sequences where they really do look very run down and stuff. This doesn't. It just looks like it's closed for the night. Everything is in kind of pristine order, so you never really get the impression that this has been left. It looks like it's been cleaned and kept in kind of good order and stuff like that. There wasn't any attempt to kind of like, you know, have wheelchairs lying around and that sort of thing. Really, it just looks too clean, in too good a nick. The acting, whilst not bad, is very just kind of like, you know, typical kind of like line deliveries and stuff like that, and people kind of reacting and very kind of like, oh, this is how people react in films, and there's nothing really outstanding done with the acting. I wouldn't say necessarily bad, but it just feels very humdrum in regard to that aspect as well. And I think the reveal of what the threat is loses a little bit of impact when it's actually revealed. So overall, for me, this would have been very much an average kind of like abandoned asylum movie, but those animated sequences knock it down because they're just terrible and they just break up the movie so badly. So I'm going to have to knock it down a point for that. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.